Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the Sudzha direction, because the most important and the most interesting updates are coming from this territory. Basically, by the evening of the 7th of March, the Russians launched their major offensive operation, and as a result of that offensive operation, the Ukrainian defense belt collapsed completely. Now there is just panic and chaos from the Ukrainian side and attempts to find a solution how to escape the Sudzha direction with minimal losses, but obviously this is not going to happen. Before we start discussing everything in details, I would like to discuss with you the changes on map that took place between the dates. For example, this is the situation by the end of the 8th of March. I would like to point your attention to the area of Novinka, to the area of Lebedevka, and to this significant number of fields, fortifications and towns in the northeastern part. So once again, this is the situation by the end of the 8th of March, and this is the situation by the beginning of the 9th of March. The Russians improved their positions in Novinka, the Russians established control over the settlement by the name of Lebedevka, the Russians entered the northern part of Malaya Lognya, and the Russians managed to take significant number of territories between the settlements of Russkaya Porечная, Cherkasskaya Porечная, Martinovka. So as you can see, and it's just reports that we managed to geolocate videos, and it's just, these are just reports that were published by different reliable sources. And telling the truth, and most likely the situation currently by the morning of the 9th of March is much worse for the Ukrainian forces, and most likely during the upcoming days we're going to adjust the map, and maybe not even once. So maybe we will color the entire Sudzha region today, who knows. Now let's discuss in details, and let's discuss how exactly did it happen, what allowed the Russians to break through the Ukrainian defense belt, what allowed the Russians to set Ukrainians in panic and in chaos. And this is another pipeline operation. Yes, according to information we have, when we started receiving this information yesterday on the 8th of March, the Russians launched another pipeline operation. The Russians managed to cross several kilometers in pipelines and to land their infantry and troopers behind the main Ukrainian positions. And that make the Ukrainians panic much, and most likely that was the beginning of complete collapse. Now let's discuss this pipeline operation in details. First, let's take a look and let's find these pipelines on map. So these are pipelines. As you can see, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines, and these are the signs of pipelines that are located below the surface. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are the 5 pipelines that the Russians before the special military operation or during the special military operation was supporting and supplying Ukraine with gas. So these are 5 pipelines, and as you can see, they're going from the territory of Russian Federation under control of Russian Federation. First, it goes through the area of Sumy. In this, for example, screen in this map, in this part of map, we can see these 5 lines beta 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is the same 5 lines underground, and these 5 lines, 5 pipelines are going exactly to this, to the border, to the Sudzha compression stations, gas transporting system of Russian Federation. So these are 5 pipelines. Here we can see them better, and using these pipelines the Russians sent up to 100 soldiers that landed exactly in this area. And the Ukrainian sources, when they managed to discover the concentration of Russian forces, began bombing and attacking them. In this video we can see how the Ukrainian drones were flying above the Russian positions, and for example, this is the landing point, and this is the first batch of Russian soldiers. So this is the area where the Russians landed. So they landed here, and when the Russians crossed these pipelines, they landed here, and from these positions the Russians began moving in the direction of the railways, because as you can see along the railways there are 3 lines, maybe there are some fortifications that were created by the Ukrainians during the first stage of the offensive operation. So the Russians' main point was to get here as fast as possible, because the Russians realized that very likely they would be discovered by the Ukrainians in the very near future. So the Russians began moving in this area with the purpose to dig in deeper. Of course, the Ukrainians managed to discover them, but as you can see according to this video, most likely by the time the Ukrainians began bombing and attacking the Russians, they managed to get the railways, and they managed to get the 3 lines. Of course, the Ukrainians were using all types of weapons they have with the purpose to attack the Russians, with the purpose to destroy this sabotage and reconnaissance group. And maybe the first wave of Russian soldiers suffered significant losses. We don't know for sure, because as you can see, the Ukrainians were using regular artillery rounds. Of course, they were using cluster rounds and maybe FPV drones. So on this map we have several points. This is the area where the Russian soldiers were bombed, and this is the second place where the Russians were bombed. As you can see, the Russians were trying to get to this area with the bridge, and they were trying to hide and to take their positions below the bridge, because this could allow the Russians to reduce the losses under the fire of Ukrainian artillery. Based on this video, we have adjusted the map and we have colored this territory in Russian favor. There are a few important things that I would like to point your attention. The Ukrainians shown us just one episode of Russians, how they landed in this area, but nobody can tell us for sure whether there were more groups of Russian forces that probably moved even further deep inside of the territory of Sudzha region. Maybe currently there are hundreds of soldiers already along the border. Nobody can tell us for sure, because it's secret operation, and maybe several soldiers landed somewhere here in the vicinity of this let's say road intersection of roads. Nobody knows for sure. We just got one episode that took place exactly in this area where the Russian soldiers were discovered. And this is like a principle of domino, and this is what the starting point when the entire domino began falling down. Because imagine yourself, at some point, at some moment, the Ukrainians began bombing and attacking this territory with cluster rounds, with artillery, with FPV drones. And what happened next? Very simple. Those Ukrainian soldiers that were located on the territory of Cherkasskaya, Porechная, Kositsa, that were located maybe in the fields between Berdin and Martinovka, what did they see when everything started? A lot of artillery strikes, explosions, cluster rounds behind their positions. Imagine yourself what was their first question. And the first question was, what is going on? What is going on behind our backs? Why the Ukrainians, why our allies, why our units and soldiers began bombing and attacking the positions along the railways that are located behind our backs? And of course, first thing they did, they decided to have some communications with their units, with their allies from different squads, what is going on, and they received very simple answer: the Russians are already behind us. And the first thing that the Ukrainians from these territories made, they decided to fall back, because they realized that there are very high chances they would be caught in cordon without any possibilities for evacuation. And the Ukrainians began running away with everything they have, with the purpose to save their lives. And they were moving through the settlement of Cherkasskaya, Porechная, Kositsa, Pravda, Ivashkovsky, Martinovka, and they answered they were moving through the industrial zone, because they realized that the main purpose of the Russians is to take under control this industrial zone, this intersection of roads, because if the Russians were able to do this, the Ukrainians obviously from this pocket would be caught in cordon without any possibilities for anything. So that's why they began acting very fast, because the Ukrainians realized that they can start counting maybe minutes or hours before the Russians would caught them in cauldron. And from the other side, while the main Ukrainian forces began retreating along this road with the purpose to save their lives, the main Russian forces began moving from the north. And we start receiving the first videos how the Russians were securing the territories in this area. And the first video we got from the territory of Cherkasskaya, Porechная, and in this video we can see how several Russian soldiers raised their flags on the territory of the church without any resistance and without any problems from the Ukrainian side. So basically the Ukrainians didn't show any resistance. Probably, according to Russians, they managed to capture several Ukrainian soldiers, but maybe those who were drunk and didn't see that everything started, and when they woke up they were already captured by the Russians. So this is the only explanation I see why not everybody managed to escape this territory. And let's we start receiving more updates. Different mappers, pro-Russian resources, neutral resources, pro-Ukrainian resources began adjusting their maps in Russian favor, and now we see that all these territories were captured and secured by the Russians completely. And by the morning of the 9th of March, several pro-Russian resources reported that indeed, as a result of offensive operation, the Russians managed to enter this industrial zone and to cut this pocket completely from supply and support. And even if there are still some Ukrainian soldiers on the territory of this area, most likely they have no chances for successful evacuation, and no chances they will be able to escape this cauldron, and more chances that they will be forced to start negotiation process with the Russians to surrender in exchange for their lives. Okay, another important thing, but not so simple, not so good, and not so easy for the convoys of the armored forces of Ukraine who decided to retreat from this territory. The Ukrainians were using this road, as we discussed. They entered first the settlement of Myrny, this northern industrial zone. Then the Ukrainians turned on the line of Oktyabrskaya Street, and the Ukrainians reached this territory where they were planning to cross the rivers and to enter, let's say, the main land, safe land or secure land. But everything wasn't so simple, because on the 8th of March we got very important video from this territory. And in this video we can see how the Russian drones, a Russian drone with fiber optic technology was flying in this area and discovering and checking, making reconnaissance operation about the situation below the bridges. And for example, in this video we can see how another Russian drone managed to discover that every single bridge in this area was already prepared to be destroyed if the Russians begin offensive. Lots of mines, lots of explosives were located below the bridges, and the Russians of course know that for sure. And these explosives was established by the Ukrainians with one purpose. If one day the Russians are able to break through the Ukrainian defense belt, the Ukrainians want to be sure that when they are able to take their forces from one side of the river to another, they need to be sure that they are able to destroy the bridges. But the problem is that the Russians decided to destroy these bridges before the Ukrainians. And in this video we can see how this bridge was destroyed, and most likely the second bridge a little bit further to the southwestern direction was also destroyed by the Russians. And this bridge was also destroyed because when the Ukrainians managed to find a solution how to cross the territory of the first bridge, they entered the area of the second bridge, and when they realized that this bridge was also destroyed, they stopped trying to find a solution how to save this convoy. This is exactly the convoy that a few hours ago was on the territory of Martinovka and Cherkasskaya Porechная, and now they are already on the territory of Sudzha, but they are blocked with this destroyed bridge. And of course the Russians began bombing and attacking the Ukrainians with everything they have. This is the same video, but with better quality. You see the bridge was destroyed, and when the Ukrainians stuck in this block, in this dead end, the Russians began bombing and attacking them. As you can see, first the Russians destroyed the last vehicle in the convoy. This allowed the Russians to block the entire convoy without any possibilities for retreat, and then the Russians basically destroyed everything they see. And in the end, the Russians sent several FPV drones to check the situation and to destroy everything that managed to survive after the Russian artillery strike. So basically, the entire convoy of the armed forces of Ukraine was completely destroyed by the Russian artillery fire. First of all, the Russians destroyed the bridges, then the Russians land infantry using pipeline operation. That forced the Ukrainians to fall back from this pocket, but this convoy was ambushed by the Russians on this territory. So as you can see, the Ukrainians just during the previous 24 hours suffered significant losses, and some sources reported by the morning of the 9th of March, just during the previous day, the Ukrainians lost up to 1,000 soldiers. If you remember, 2 days ago we were talking that 1,000 of Ukrainian soldiers is already ready to start negotiation process to surrender. So summarizing everything, we can make a conclusion that just during the previous 2 days, the Ukrainians lost up to 2,000 soldiers as a result of clashes on this territory. So we have discussed almost everything about the eastern part of Sudzha. We see complete collapse of the armed forces of Ukraine defense, and we see that the Russians managed to carry out very powerful and successful pipeline operation. Now let's discuss the situation from the northern part. And when talking about this territory, we see the same picture. The Ukrainians, when they realized that the Russians began bombing and attacking them from the south, they also decided to retreat. And the source reported that Ukrainians began running away from the territory of Malaya Loknya during the night between the 7th and between the 8th and the 9th of March. The Ukrainians, due to the fact that this is very farthest position from the mainland, were trying to retreat from this area using just their feet without vehicles, because most of the vehicles were destroyed as a result of Russian FPV drone control. In this video we can see just a picture, and in this picture we can see several points, several dots of Ukrainian soldiers that were running away from Malaya Loknya in the southern direction. But the problem is that during the previous days, the Russians destroyed also almost every single bridge in this area. For example, this is the video where we can see how another bridge or pontoon bridge of the armed forces of Ukraine was destroyed as a result of Russian FAB 3000 strike. So the bridge was destroyed, and currently the vehicles of the armed forces of Ukraine that located further on the top to the north of this area currently have no chances for evacuation. And as you can see in the final part of this video, we can see several Ukrainian units, soldiers that were trying to cross this river without vehicles, just on their own feet. This is another bridge that was destroyed. So basically, the logistic that supported the northern part was destroyed by the Russians also during the previous 48 hours. But of course, this didn't stop the Ukrainians. This situation just not like improved, but speed up the entire process of collapsing and retreat. And the Ukrainians basically, in panic, began running away from their positions in the northern part without waiting or without any orders from the Ukrainian commanders. And this is the hell on earth picture in the to the north of Kazachi Lokny. As you can see, several flames sources, several flames area covered with flame, and this is exactly the places where the Russians were bombing and attacking the convoys of the armored forces of Ukraine that were trying to escape this territory with the purpose to save their lives. So summarizing everything, we can make a conclusion that most likely by the end of the 9th of March, everything, let's say, that located to the north of this red line would be captured by the Russians, or we will discover and the positions of the armed forces of Russian Federation. Most likely there would be still several pockets of resistance in this part, but it would be just a matter of time when the Russians will secure them. And obviously this is going to be the beginning of entire process of retreat from the armed forces of Ukraine from the city of Sudzha. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to discover several positions and the headquarters of the armed forces of Ukraine on the territory of Sudzha itself, and as a result of Iskander strike, these positions were also destroyed. So there is just chaos and panic from the Ukrainian side without any possibilities to restore the situation. Furthermore, when talking about the western flank, today the Russian soldiers published another video where we can see how several Russian soldiers raised their flag in the central part of the settlement of Lebedevka. We believe that the entire village was already secured and cleared by the Russians, but maybe there are still also several pockets of resistance from the Ukrainian side that will take time for the Russians to secure them and to clear them. Anyway, the progress and offensive from this area is also continuous. Furthermore, according to information we have, the Russians managed to establish complete control over the settlement of Novinke, and this is already the Sumy region. In this video we can see lots of Ukrainian FPV drone attacks on the Russian positions in this area. One of the episodes was geolocated exactly in this point. So this is the situation by the beginning of the 9th of March of 2025. As you can see, the situation for the armed forces of Ukraine is a complete disaster, complete panic and complete chaos. These are just three words that we can use to describe the situation from the Ukrainian side, and we believe that Ukrainians have no chances to hold their positions on the territory of this region for the next days. It's just a matter of maybe several hours when the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back. There's just one option when the Ukrainians can hold these positions very long. It's the situation when the Russians will be able to caught the Ukrainians in cauldron, and the Ukrainians will try to hold their positions as long as possible with the purpose or thinking that the Ukrainians from Sumy region will counterattack with the purpose to unblock them. But obviously this is not going to happen because currently the Ukrainians have no forces to do this, because the main forces were sent by the Ukrainians in the direction of Toretsk and Pokrovsk with the purpose to counterattack the Russian units and to restore control over several positions in this area and to probably cut the salient in the vicinity of Pokrovsk. So that's why Ukrainians have no chances in Sumy to save the situation and to restore everything as it used to be. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.